There is a kind of morning that exists only in places most people never find. The air is cool, the light is low and golden, and the only sound is the soft movement of wind through tall grass, or the slow breath of a river that has been running through this same valley for thousands of years. In June, the world accelerates, airports fill, highways stretch with lines of cars, beaches become carpeted with color and noise. Summer arrives, and with it, a kind of collective urgency to go, to arrive, to experience. But there are places that the urgency never reaches. Places where June looks exactly like it did a century ago, where the wildflowers open at their own pace, where the water is still cold from snowmelt, where you can sit for an entire afternoon without seeing another soul. These places exist in the United States, in Canada, in the United Kingdom. They are not myths, they are not inaccessible. They simply require a different kind of attention, a slower kind of looking, and the people who know them, the farmers, the fishermen, the old hikers, the quiet ones, they guard them gently, not with hostility, but with the careful love that comes from understanding what stillness is worth. Today, we move through 10 of these places, slowly, without rush. We let each one breathe. And perhaps, by the end, you will understand why some secrets are worth keeping. Somewhere in the high desert of southeastern Utah, there is a canyon that most maps don't bother to name. It sits beyond the reaches of the national park system, past a dirt road that locals use mostly for cattle. The land around it is open and rust-colored, stretched wide under a sky that seems larger than anywhere else on Earth. To get there, you drive until the pavement ends, and then you keep driving. The canyon itself reveals itself slowly. First, just a crack in the earth, a thin, dark line that could be shadow. And then, as you approach on foot over warm red rock, it opens. Wide, deep, carved by a river that took 2 million years to do its work. The walls are a deep amber in the morning. By noon, they shift toward copper. In late afternoon, they burn with a color that has no proper name, something between red and orange, and the feeling of fire, but without the heat. The canyon floor is soft. There is sand here, carried and sorted by seasonal floods, and it cushions every step. Small desert plants grow in crevices, tough and delicate at once, surviving on almost nothing. There is a spring near the northern end, a small seep of water from the rock that feeds a narrow ribbon of green in an otherwise dry world. Cattail, ferns somehow, a few cottonwood trees that glow pale gold even in summer. Wildlife comes here because they know this water. A great horned owl nests in a notch of sandstone 30 feet up. A family of ringtail cats has claimed a den beneath a boulder near the spring. At dawn, mule deer step quietly to the water's edge and drink with long, careful pulls. The silence here is not empty. It is full of small sounds, the trickle of the spring, the occasional creak of cottonwood branches, the high, thin whistle of a canyon wren moving through the shadows. Local ranchers have used this canyon for decades. They know every water hole, every shaded overhang, every place where the rock shifts underfoot. They come here in the early morning before the heat arrives, and they leave by midday. They do not talk about it much. When asked, they speak carefully. They describe the land as if it were a family member, with pride and with protectiveness, and with the quiet fear that comes from knowing how fragile beautiful things can be. In June, the light in this canyon is extraordinary. The days are long. The sun traces a slow arc through the southern sky, and the shadows in the canyon shift constantly, revealing new textures in the rock. Cross-bedded sandstone, ancient dunes turned to stone, the fossil memories of a world that existed before anything walked upright. You can stay here for hours and feel the time pass differently. Not faster, not slower, just differently, like time has loosened its grip a little. Now, we move north, far north, into the boreal forest of northern Ontario, where the trees are dense and dark, and the lakes are too numerous to count. Canada has more lakes than the rest of the world combined. Most people know this fact, but knowing it and seeing it from a float plane above northern Ontario are two completely different experiences. From the air, the land below is almost half water. Lakes nested inside forests. Forests nested between lakes, the whole thing stitched together by rivers and streams and the soft mathematics of glacial retreat. Most of these lakes have never had a permanent human settlement on their shore. There is one lake, several hours north of the nearest highway, that a small community of Cree families has fished for generations. They come each summer by boat, navigating a chain of connected waterways that no GPS system reliably maps. The lake itself is unremarkable in photographs, wide and gray under cloudy skies, fringed with black spruce and tamarack. But on a clear morning in June, when the water is still and the air is cold enough to see your breath, and the first light comes low and pink through the trees, it becomes something else entirely. The water reflects the sky with perfect stillness, not a mirror, something softer, something that absorbs the light rather than bouncing it back, so that you look at the surface and feel that you are looking into depth rather than looking at reflection. Loons call from across the water. Their sound carries for miles over the stillness. It is one of those sounds that gets inside you in a way you don't quite expect, mournful and beautiful, and wild in equal measure. The fishing here is remarkable. Lake trout and walleye move through deep, cold water that has never been stocked, never been managed, never been anything other than what it has always been. The fish are careful, old. They do not strike at just anything. The families who know this lake do not advertise it. There is no marina, no boat launch, no campground with numbered sites. To stay here requires knowing someone who knows someone, and that chain of knowing is long and slow and built entirely on trust. The Cree families who have stewarded this lake for centuries understand something that takes most visitors years to grasp, that a place must be used with restraint in order to remain itself. That wildness is not a passive state. It must be actively protected by the choices of the people who love it. In June, the boreal forest is at its most alive. The mosquitoes are everywhere. Yes, that is simply true, but so are the wood warbler, a dozen species moving through the canopy in waves of color and song. So are the moose, wading in the shallows to eat aquatic plants, their massive bodies surprisingly graceful in water. So is the night sky, which in this far north darkness is absolute, and the stars are not just visible but architectural, structured, and overwhelming, the Milky Way rising like a slow river above the tree line. You sleep here to the sound of water lapping on rock, and in the morning, you wake to silence, and the day begins again. Cross the Atlantic now, slowly. Let time move the way it moves over open water, not marked by minutes, but by light and weather, and the slow roll of the sea. We arrive in the far northwest of Scotland, the Highlands, but not the part that appears on postcards. Not Glencoe in August, full of camper vans and telephoto lenses. Not Loch Ness, circled by tour buses and souvenir shops. No, we go further, into Assynt sits in the northwest corner of Sutherland. It is one of the most ancient landscapes in the world. The rocks here are Louisian gneiss, some of the oldest exposed rock on the surface of the earth, formed nearly 3 billion years ago. When you place your hand on a boulder in Assynt, you are touching something that existed before complex life, before fish, before trees, before almost everything. The mountains here are strange and solitary. They rise from a flat, peat-covered moor as isolated peaks, not ridges or ranges, but individual mountains standing apart from each other, like old thoughts that never quite connected. Suilven, Stac Pole, Canis, each one with its own personality, its own silhouette against the sky. In June, the light here is extraordinary. This far north, the sun barely sets. The sky in the small hours of the morning holds a long, slow twilight, a lingering golden hour that lasts for hours rather than minutes. The lochs catch this light and hold it. The peat bogs glow amber. The heather, still weeks from its purple peak, is a deep and satisfying green. There are few roads in Assynt. The ones that exist are single-track, passing places marked by small signs, requiring drivers to pull over and wait for oncoming traffic, and to wave as it passes, which everyone does, because in this place the gesture still feels natural. The villages are small, a dozen houses, a post office that is also a grocery store, that is also, sometimes, a place to sit and talk, a pub that closes early because most people wake early here, fishermen, crofters, a few artists who came years ago and never left. The sea lochs of Assynt reach inland like fingers. The water is cold and clear and green. Otters hunt along the seaweed-covered rocks at the waterline. Sometimes, if you sit very still near the shore at dusk, you will see one, a dark shape moving through the water with effortless precision, then hauling out onto a rock to eat, its whiskers catching the last light. Locals in Ascent speak about the land the way people speak about old family, with a mixture of love and exasperation and deep, unshakable attachment. They have watched visitors arrive for decades. They have seen the camper vans park on fragile peat bog. They have watched drone operators frighten nesting eagles. They have cleaned up after fires in places where peat can smolder underground for weeks. And still, they love the place fiercely. And still, they hope the right visitors will come, the ones who sit quietly, who walk carefully, who leave nothing behind. In June, on a clear day, you can climb Suilven, a long and satisfying walk that rewards with views that seem to reach the edge of the world. Hundreds of lochs below, the Atlantic to the west, and nothing between you and the horizon but air and light. Standing there, you understand something. That scale can be humbling without being frightening. That to feel small is not to feel diminished, that there are places so old and so vast that simply being present in them is enough. We return to North America now, to a coast most people think they know, but don't. The Pacific Northwest of the United States is famous for its rain, its forests, its dramatic coastline. Oregon and Washington draw visitors each year to places like Cannon Beach and the Olympic Peninsula, but there is a stretch of the Oregon coast, south of the headlands most people reach, tucked between two state parks, that remains almost entirely local. It requires a walk, not a difficult one, but a real one. Perhaps an hour through coastal forest, over damp root and soft earth, the smell of cedar and salal everywhere, the sound of the ocean growing slowly louder, until suddenly the trees part and you are standing at the edge of a sea-stack beach. The beach is small, perhaps a quarter-mile of fine dark sand, flanked by rock formations that rise from the water, like the ruins of something ancient. The sea stacks are covered in life, mussels in great blue-black clusters, sea anemones in the tidal pools, barnacles everywhere, and above them, nesting colonies of seabirds, muries, pigeon guillemots, tufted puffins in their summer-breeding plumage. In June, the puffins are extraordinary. They land on the rock ledges with their bright orange bills and their clown-like feet, looking simultaneously dignified and ridiculous, which is perhaps the most honest possible combination for any living thing to project. The tidal pools here are among the richest on the Oregon coast. Ochre sea stars, once devastated by disease, slowly recovering, begin to reappear in the lower pool. Purple urchin, chiton, hermit crabs moving with great purpose through shallow water. The local fishing community has monitored this beach for 30 years. They have documented the wildlife, reported poachers, and quietly advocated for buffer zones that protect the nesting birds from disturbance. They don't advertise their monitoring, they simply show up, year after year, with notebooks and patience. The ocean here is the Pacific, not the warm Pacific of the South. This water is cold, fed by the California current, bringing Arctic water down the coast. It is rich with nutrients, upwelling zones where deep cold water rises to the surface, carrying minerals that feed plankton, that feed everything else. Gray whales pass offshore in their migration. Harbor seals haul out on rocky islets. Brown pelicans, a species that nearly vanished in the 20th century, glide in low formations over the water with a prehistoric elegance that makes everything else seem newly arrived. Sitting on this beach on a June afternoon, with fog beginning to soften the horizon, and the light diffusing into a perfect, even gray, it feels like the world is breathing, slowly, deeply, without concern for you. And somehow, that is exactly what you needed. Now to a valley in the interior of British Columbia, a place so quiet that the silence has texture. The Similkameen Valley runs east to west along the Similkameen River, which begins in the mountains near Manning Provincial Park and flows west before crossing into Washington state. The valley is wide and warm, sheltered by dry mountains on both sides, and it grows tree fruit, peaches, apricot, cherry, wine grape, in small family orchards that have been worked for generations. But above the valley floor, above the orchards and the small towns and the single highway that threads through it all, the landscape changes. The terrain becomes high and dry and open. Ponderosa pine parkland, trees spaced widely, sunlight reaching the grass below, the ground covered in bunch grasses and wildflowers that would stop you in your tracks if you happened upon them anywhere else in the world. In June, the bunchgrass hills of the Similkameen are in full bloom. Desert parsley and balsam root open yellow faces to the sun. Lupine runs purple along every slope. The rare and threatened antelope brush, a scraggly, unremarkable-looking shrub that is in fact the cornerstone of an entire ecological community, is just finishing its fragrant late spring bloom. Loggerhead shrikes hunt from the tops of the tallest shrub. This species, a predatory songbird that impales its prey on thorns, is considered at risk in Canada, and the Similkameen is one of its last strong holdouts. The local ranching families who manage the grasslands above the valley floor do so with a careful awareness of what they have. They have watched the grasslands to the east and north disappear under subdivision and vineyard monoculture. They have attended the meeting and read the reports and signed the agreements that keep their land in grazing rather than development. They do this not purely from sentiment. They do it because they understand that healthy grassland is productive land. That land managed with patience gives back more than land extracted from. In the evenings here, when the heat of the day softens and the light turns amber and the valley below fills with a gentle haze, the grasslands above it become something astonishing. Every blade of grass glows. The pine bark turns gold. The birds fall quiet, one by one, and you are left with the sound of the wind, just the wind, moving through bunch grass in the long, slow rhythm that nothing human has ever quite managed to replicate. Back to the United Kingdom now, to a part of England most visitors never consider, the Yorkshire wolds. Not the moor, those dark and dramatic uplands that appear in novels and television adaptations. Not the dale, those limestone valleys beloved by walkers and tourists alike. The wolds are something else, quieter, less dramatic, and in their quietness, somehow more beautiful. The wolds are a range of chalk hills in the East Riding of Yorkshire, running from the Humber estuary in the south to the cliffs at Flamborough Head in the north. They are gently rolling, the English countryside of imagination, fields stitched together with hedgerows, valleys so soft they seem hand-shaped. In June, the wolds are rapturous. The chalk grasslands that survive between the arable fields are full of wildflowers, cowslips still lingering, ox-eye daisies just opening, the small blue flowers of chalk milkwort scattered through the grass like fallen fragments of sky. Skylarks rise from every meadow, climbing on song, invisible before they are very high. The villages here are small and old, stone-built farms with red pantel roofs, a style brought here by Dutch traders centuries ago, now so familiar it seems simply native. Village pubs that smell of old wood and stillness, churchyards where the oldest graves have sunk below the grass. Their inscriptions softened past reading. The people of the wolds are not unfriendly, but they are reserved. They will help you if you need help. They will point you toward the right path, or the best viewpoint, or the hidden chalk stream, but they will not volunteer information, and they will notice if you leave a gate open, and they will remember. The chalk streams of the wolds are among the rarest habitats in the world, formed where rainwater filters slowly through chalk and emerges cold and clear and mineral-rich. These streams support aquatic life found almost nowhere else, specific species of moss, of invertebrate, of fish that have adapted over millennia to these precise conditions. Brown trout move through the clearest water you have ever seen, visible from above, hanging in the current like brush strokes. Fly fishermen have worked these streams for generations. They move slowly, deliberately. They understand the water. They take sometimes, and they release often, and they feel accountable to the fish and to the stream in a way that is difficult to articulate but easy to recognize. In the long June evenings, the light on the wolds is something specific to England, soft and horizontal and slightly melancholy, the sun unwilling to fully set until nearly 10 o'clock, the sky cycling through colors too gradual to track. You walk a ridgetop path and watch the light change below you, the valley floor moving from gold to green to blue shadow, over the course of an hour. And you think this is why people have lived here for 10,000 years. Not for drama, for constancy, for the soft accumulation of seasons in a landscape that holds them all. We go now to the Great Lakes, to a stretch of shoreline on Lake Superior that very few people outside the region know. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. Its western end, where Minnesota meets Wisconsin near the Apostle Islands, is known enough, visited enough, celebrated enough. But the eastern shore, where Ontario meets the cold blue immensity of the lake, is different. It is emptier, harsher, more demanding, and more beautiful because of it. The eastern Lake Superior shoreline in Ontario is all Canadian shield, ancient granite, rising straight from the water, red and gray and pink in different lights, scoured clean by glaciers and beaten by winter storms that can rival ocean swells. The trees come right to the edge, white pine and jack pine, wind-shaped and tilted, growing from cracks in the rock with a stubbornness that seems personal. There are small provincial parks along this shore, but the camping quotas are low and the roads are slow, and most people don't drive this far east before turning back. So on most June mornings, the shore is empty. The water of Lake Superior is cold, even in summer. Cold enough to be dangerous, cold enough to be numbing, cold enough that on a still morning, it holds the chill of the air above it and creates a local microclimate, cooler and damper than the forest, just meters inland. Fog is common here in June. It rolls off the lake in the morning and softens everything: the rock, the trees, the far shore when it's visible. Fog here is not gray and oppressive. It is luminous. The light comes through it, diffused and even, and the world looks like a watercolor painting made mostly of pale green and silver. Herring gulls nest on the flat tops of offshore islands, and their calls carry across the water with a mournfulness that suits this landscape exactly. Bald eagles fish from the rocky points, sitting still for long minutes before lifting and dropping with precision. The communities along this shore are small and seasonal. A few fishing lodges, a gas station that also sells live bait and homemade pies, a small motel run by a family that has been here since the 1950s, who know the lake in every season and who will tell you, if you sit long enough at their table, things about it that no guidebook contains. They speak of the lake as locals always speak of large water, with respect that borders on reverence. Lake Superior is not predictable. It is not safe. It does what it wants. People have drowned in it in June, on sunny days, in calm-seeming weather, and the communities that live beside it carry that knowledge in a quiet, continuous way that shapes how they move and talk and make decisions. But in the early morning, when the fog is just beginning to lift, and the light is turning from gray to gold, and the lake is still and the shore is empty, it is one of the most peaceful places on earth. A beauty that asks nothing of you, only that you be present. To the American Southeast. Now, to a place that surprises people who think they know what the South looks like. The Congaree floodplain in South Carolina is the largest intact expanse of old-growth bottomland hardwood forest in the United States. Most of it is protected within Congaree National Park, but the park sees only a fraction of the visitors that more famous parks attract, partly because it doesn't have mountains or coastline, and partly because it doesn't photograph easily. But bottomland hardwood forest at peak has a beauty that is almost overwhelming in person. The trees here are immense. Champion-sized loblolly pines, bald cypresses with their knobby knees rising from black water, overcup oaks draped in resurrection fern, the whole canopy rising 40, 50, 60 meters above a floodplain that floods regularly and richly, depositing nutrients that have made these trees the giants they are. In June, the forest is in full leaf. Walking through it is like walking inside something, not just beneath trees, but within a living structure, something with its own weather and light and smell. The light that reaches the forest floor has been filtered through multiple layers of leaves, so it arrives green-tinted and soft, falling in shafts through gaps in the canopy. The water here is everywhere in June. The Congaree River floods the forest dozens of times each year, and the evidence is visible in the watermarks on tree tree trunks, in the sediment textures on the ground, in the way the land is never quite dry. Visitors paddle through the forest in canoes, moving silently between trees that rise from the water like cathedral columns. The wildlife of Congaree is extraordinary, but unhurried. Barred owls call in the middle of the day, their "who cooks for you" echoing through the trees. Cottonmouth snakes move slowly through the shallows, indifferent to observation. River otters slide in and out of the water with that characteristic otter playfulness that makes it difficult to watch them without smiling. The local community around the park, small towns, farming families, indigenous communities with long connections to this floodplain, have complex feelings about its protected status. Some welcomed, others resisted. The history is not simple. What is simple is the forest itself, which has been here for much longer than any argument about it, which floods and regenerates and grows on its own schedule, unconcerned with human timeline. The mosquitoes in June are formidable. This must be said honestly. But the dawn hours, before the heat arrives, before the insects fully wake, those hours in the bottomland forest are among the most beautiful in the American South. The light coming through cypress trees over black water, prothonotory warbler, small gold bird, impossibly bright, moving through the understory. The smell of wet earth and old growth, and something that has no name but feels fundamentally, anciently alive. Now to Nova Scotia, to the western shore of Cape Breton Island, away from the Cabot Trail, which in July and August is lined bumper to bumper with RV-88. The walls are basalt, dark, fractured, layered in horizontal bands that record millions of years of volcanic activity. The river at the bottom is green and cold, and full of fish that see very few anglers. In June, the sagebrush uplands surrounding the canyons are extraordinary. The big sagebrush is at its most aromatic, that sharp, clean, medicinal smell that is unlike anything else in nature, and that, once experienced, becomes forever associated with this particular kind of open space and sky. Sage grouse perform their elaborate dawn leks earlier in the year, but in June, their young move through the brush, small, speckled, close to the ground, invisible until they move. Pronghorn, the second fastest land animal on Earth, capable of sustained speeds that leave almost everything behind, move across the flats in groups of 5 or 10, heads high, watching you with large amber eyes. The golden eagles here are numerous. They nest on the basalt rim rock and hunt the sagebrush flats. And in June, they are raising young, large, fluffy, demanding young that can be seen in nests if you know which cliffs to watch, calling with a sound that is more bark than cry. The ranching families who work this country have done so for generations. It is not easy country. The winters are severe, the summers are hot and dry. The distances between things are significant, but these families have developed a relationship with the Oihi that is unlike anything possible in a landscape that has been domesticated and fragmented. They know it as a whole. They know which springs run year-round and which go dry by August. They know where the lightning strikes most often and which draws flood first in a cloudburst. They know the hawks by behavior as well as species, and they know which hillsides the deer favor at the end of a dry September. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It lives in people. And in June, with the sky enormous overhead and the sage fragrant, and the canyon wrens singing from the rim rock in their impossible descending cascade of notes. In June, this knowledge feels like the most important thing in the world. We have traveled far today, from red desert canyons to boreal forest lakes, from ancient Scottish mountains to chalk English valleys, from Ontario's cold granite shore to Carolina's flood-gilded bottomland, from Nova Scotia's evening light to Idaho's sage-scented silence. 10 places, 10 quietnesses, 10 pieces of a world that is still, in some of its corners, whole. These places share something that is harder to describe than location or landscape or wildlife. They share a quality of time, time that moves the way it once moved everywhere, not faster than necessary, not louder than needed, not more than enough. The people who love these places do so carefully. They understand, most of them intuitively, through generations of living close to the land, that love without restraint is not love at all. It is consumption dressed in sentiment. That to truly love a place is to want it to remain, to be willing to let it be still, to accept that you are a visitor, always, in something larger and older and more patient than yourself. There is a particular grief that comes from watching a quiet place become a crowded one. Those who have lived beside these landscapes have felt it many times. The first road, the first sign, the first season when the parking area fills before sunrise, and something shifts, not all at once, but incrementally, irreversibly. The wild things adapt or retreat. The fragile plants are walked on until they stop growing. The silence that was the whole point fills with the sounds of people looking for silence. This is the paradox that lives at the heart of all wild and beautiful places, the desire to share them and the knowledge that sharing changes them. The question of how many people a quiet place can hold before it becomes a different kind of place entirely. There are no easy answers to this. The people who have thought about it longest still disagree. The answers are different in every place, for every ecosystem, in every season.